Micah 5, 1 through 5. Marshal your troops, O city of troops, for a siege is laid against us. They will strike Israel's ruler on the cheek with a rod. But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Therefore Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor gives birth, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, and the majesty of the name of the Lord is God. And they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth, and he will be their peace. When the Assyrian invades our land and marches through our fortresses, we will raise against him 7 shepherds, even 8 leaders of men. Hello, welcome to the online message of Corinth Christian Church. In Paw Paw, Michigan on June 6, 2007, 21-year-old Ben Carpenter was traveling in a wheelchair moving across the intersection at a crosswalk. He was in a wheelchair because he had muscular dystrophy. And as he was going down the sidewalk, him and his caretaker had gone out for some air. And when they got to this intersection, he decided to cross it before this caretaker caught up with him. He turned in front of a semi-truck that was waiting there at the stoplight, and as he started to make his way across the crosswalk, the light turned green. He realized he wasn't going to be able to make it all the way across the street, so he turned around to go back to the sidewalk. As he turned, the driver couldn't see him because he was so high in the cab, and Ben was so close to the front of the pickup of the tractor trailer that the hood obscured his vision of seeing him right in front. And so the driver hits the gas, the engine revs up, the truck begins to move, and it comes in contact with Carpenter's wheelchair. And as he has turned to go back to the intersection, to the sidewalk, his wheelchair is now facing down the road. And when his truck comes in contact with the chair, the handles of the truck get stuck in the grill of this semi. Oblivious to the fact that he now is pushing a man in a wheelchair going down the road, the driver continues down the road at approximately 55 miles an hour. Oncoming trucks and cars see this spectacle going down the road, a semi pushing someone in a wheelchair going down the road at 55 miles an hour, and they're waving at the truck trying to get him to pull over. He later said, "I just thought people were being extra friendly." Eventually, 2 off-duty police officers saw what was happening and turned to pursue the truck and try to stop it. Luckily, the truck was only traveling to its company lot, which was still 2 miles down the road. And as it pulled in and stopped, the police pulled up to him. The truck driver had no idea what was taking place. But as you looked behind the truck, there were 2 black streaks where the rubber tires on the chair had been worn completely off. Now, Ben was unharmed from this. They took him to the hospital just for observation, but it all turned out with pretty much a happy ending. Can you imagine what was going through Ben's mind, though? Here he is, that everything is out of his control. He's being pushed along at 55 miles an hour by something that could run over him completely and could destroy him in the process. He found himself in a situation that we might call chaos and crisis, and there was nothing that he could do to stop it. Now, the horrible situation for him to be in that chaos and crisis is somewhat uncommon for something like that to happen. But for each one of us, we all face situations where we face chaos and crisis. It's not that uncommon in everyone's life to face it at some point. We face varying degrees of problems and chaotic crisis where maybe we lose control or we are involved in something in which we don't have control. And that's just the world that we live in. For the past couple weeks and going forward until Christmas, we're talking about what Christmas is all about. And Micah the prophet said that there was this backwoods village, and in that village there would be born a child who would help us with the reality of the crisis and the chaos that we face in this world. You know, we often hear people talk about the fact that we need to make sure Christ is in Christmas, that we put Christ back into Christmas, and other sayings like that. Micah here says we need to make sure we let Christ into our chaos as well, into our crisis as well. When Micah comes on the scene in Israel, Israel is in major crisis. The whole country, at least what left of it, is caught up in the chaos and crisis of the events that's taking place. God's people, the Jews, had split into two different nations as a result of a civil war. The northern kingdom had taken 10 tribes and kept the name Israel, while the southern kingdom had 2 tribes and kept the capital city of Jerusalem, and they were called Judah. And about 700 years before Jesus is born, about the same time that Isaiah is prophesying, Micah is taking a message from God to the northern kingdom of Israel. Judah is still trying to follow God and obey His commandments to some degree. But Israel, they've kind of forgotten about God. And this is a very volatile time in their history. The Assyrian Empire is in the process of carving up one nation, one city, one province, one tribe at a time. And they're coming through with their commander Sennacherib, threatening to destroy all the country and take people into captivity. They're going to scatter the Israelites all over their empire. They're coming, and there's really nothing that Israel can do about it. In verse 1, he prophesies the equivalent of, "Better get your guns, boys. There's going to be a fight." And what he says is, "Marshal your troops, your city of troops." And what that means in the original language, if you look at it very literally, is secure the walls of your city. Secure the walls. Either way, it's saying the same thing. Whatever you're depending on to protect you, to resist your enemies, you better get it up and get it going. Now, if you read on, it says to the Israelites, it won't do you any good. He says that your city is going to be under siege soon. God's going to abandon them to the enemy. See, God has a plan to cause them to end their disobedience and to bring the northern kingdom back to Him again. The only problem with the plan, as far as we would see, is that it's going to take a while and it's going to hurt. There's an aspect of it that it's going to hurt. Sometimes God lets people feel the heat for a time so that they can learn to be faithful to Him, and that's what's going to take place here. He says, you'll be under siege. The enemy will surround your city walls and not let anyone or anything in or out. The enemy's going to let people starve for a while, and he will break their will to fight back. Describes how they'll slap their king around. One of the most insulting things that you could do at that time was to hit someone in the face. And he says that's exactly what's going to happen to the king of Israel. Not just going to slap them, but he's going to hit them with a stick like they would an animal. But then Micah says in verse 2, there's good news. The good news for Israel is that someone is coming from one of Judah's smallest villages, and he's going to rule over you. Someone is going to come out of the southern kingdom and is going to be ruling over the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Now you might say, well, the northern kingdom might have thought, how's that a good news that we're going to have somebody that we're split from in a civil war, and they're going to send somebody to rule over us? How's that a good thing? I mean, in some ways, the message of Micah might seem odd at first. Micah here is from the southern kingdom of Judah, but he's prophesying to the northern kingdom, to Israel, right in the midst of talking to Israel about this battle with Assyria. He wants to talk about this little town called Bethlehem. And you could say, how's that going to give us hope? In the eyes of the people of Israel, Bethlehem is just a meaningless wide spot in the middle of the road leading out of Jerusalem. And Micah's saying that there's some kid that's going to be born there that's going to keep Assyria from invading our nation. I mean, we could understand it if it was a prince or a warrior out of Jerusalem maybe, but out of Bethlehem? Imagine, Canada was upset because Russian troops were crossing the polar ice cap to invade them. And the governor of Kentucky sends a message, says, "Don't worry, Canada, because the Russians don't know what we have in Birdie." That's kind of the picture that's being painted here. This is a time of national crisis. This is a time of ensuing chaos. And yet you're going to call for a prophecy out of this little backwoods area that hardly no one even knows about. But there is a time coming when the prophecy of Bethlehem would be fulfilled. You know, just like this time in the life of the Israelites, the story of the first Christmas is bathed in an atmosphere of crisis and chaos. Just like Ben Carpenter on the front of that truck, the people of God were being dragged around by a huge empire, the Roman Empire. They had no control, no rights, no means of fighting back, no hope. And maybe we can relate to that. Maybe for some, Christmas is coming in crisis. Maybe for some, Christmas is just creating more chaos. Maybe you're like the Israel of Micah's day and the day Jesus was born. Your life feels upside down. Maybe you're afraid. Maybe you know something is coming, or maybe it's already here. And whatever it is frightens you because you have no control. You're stuck in the grill of a runaway semi of debt. You're scared to go to school because bullies seem to be in charge. You're facing financial situations or relationship situations. Anxiety is keeping you afraid of things in your head that you know are not real. You know they're not going to hurt you, but still it's how you feel. And maybe Christmas is just a time of depression. You can't even find the strength to care enough to even fight through it. If that's the case, we can recognize Jesus is still the Christ of crisis. He's still the Christ of chaos. No matter how small we are, no matter how bad we hurt, no matter how deeply we are afraid, Micah says the child of Bethlehem has come to heal and restore. And as usual, God uses the most unusual to do the incredible. Micah wasn't that well known of all the prophets. He wasn't like Isaiah or Jeremiah or Daniel. The whole history of his prophecies only cover 7 chapters in the Old Testament. But God uses him to pinpoint the birthplace of his son when he would come to earth. There's a piece written by a well-known rabbi that argued that Micah's prophecy had nothing to do with the Messiah at all. He said it definitely didn't point to the birth of Jesus. But God leaves no doubts here. When the wise men appeared with limited knowledge about the newborn king, Herod consulted the most learned rabbis of the day as where this baby would be born. As a unified group, they quoted Micah. He'd be born in Bethlehem. God had spoken through his prophet. Don't know that Micah ever guessed that he'd be talking about him 2,700 years after he spoke these words. God surprises the world with people that he chooses to use to bring peace and hope, even in the midst of chaos. And in this case, it was Micah that God used. You know, Bethlehem itself is not really what you would call an impressive town, even by the first century Middle Eastern standards. Jesus could have been born in Jerusalem or Rome to a family of kings or powerful rulers. If Bethlehem shows us anything, it's the humility and humanity of Christ. Born in a place where all he had for his bed was a feeding trough nearby. He was born to a virgin who was disgraced by those who couldn't believe that her pregnancy was a God thing. He was born to a carpenter who probably was doing well, and now he's having to live hand to mouth. If Christmas was bathed in chaos and crisis, Bethlehem was ground zero. Micah maybe didn't foresee how important he would be in God's plan. And maybe you don't recognize it either. Maybe you don't recognize how God is using you. Maybe in the worst moment of your worst pain, you can't tell how much He's healing you to bring to someone else's life some peace out of this chaos. Maybe only heaven will tell the story of how God put you into crisis and chaos for a time to lead someone out of theirs. For parents, you may not see it right now, or maybe even in your lifetime, but you're to keep teaching your kids about Jesus to change their eternity. School teachers are to keep loving those kids, and maybe someday they'll wonder why, and you can tell them about the one that loved you. Maybe there's someone that is coming to you and just needs an ear to listen, that they can pour out their tears. And if that's the case, you need to keep listening. Later, some of them may listen to you and you can show them the hope in Jesus. You know, there's so many people that have an impact on us as we grow. So many people that have an impact on us maybe when we're younger. And we could all think of people who've made a difference in some way in our life. As we look at those people and recognize the difference that they've made, we need to make sure that we have the faith that God can use us to bless someone else in crisis. Maybe you've been blessed in crisis and now you need to be useful to Him. You know, in this passage, Micah talks about God being a shepherd through crisis and chaotic times. Micah says that the child of Bethlehem will stand and shepherd God's people. In Him they will live securely. He will be their peace. When we think about Jesus, we recognize that He's a ruler. We recognize that He's a judge. But more than that, He's also a shepherd. He's a shepherd king. And David wrote about it in the 23rd Psalm. When we read that passage, we think of the comfort that we receive by reading that passage. But in reality, it's written out of a time of crisis and chaos itself. There was want in the world. There was hunger and poverty and loneliness. There was a valley of the shadow of death to be walked through. This passage describes there was evil. But this shepherd, when He shows up, He says, "You shall not want." There are green pastures to feed on. He provides us with still waters. He walks through the valley. No need to fear that evil. Would be goodness and mercy and home to dwell in forever and ever. And it's all because of Bethlehem. Being the smallest cities of Judah would bring forth a child who would shepherd His people. Once when Jesus was teaching, John said in John 10, verse 11, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." Today, maybe you're walking through the valley of shadow of death. Maybe today you're stuck in crisis and chaos. If that's the case, you can receive the grace of the good shepherd. You can respond to a shepherd who loves his sheep, who has laid down his life for his sheep, loving us far beyond what we deserved, not because of who we are or what we've done, but because of who He is and what He does. You know, maybe today's the day that you recognize that you can come out of this chaos. You can come out of this conflict that you're facing, and you can find peace. You can find comfort. You can find answers to the problems that you might have. They're all found in Jesus. Jesus offers you this peace in the middle of conflict and chaos. He offers you this peace in the middle of crisis that you might be facing. He wants you to know the one who is the ultimate peacemaker, the one who will make a difference in your life and the world that you live in. that no matter what you're facing, no matter what situation it might be in, you can know that there's one there who will care for you and will love you and that will provide for you. Will provide for you as a person who intercedes on the behalf of peace, a person that overcomes chaos and crisis. Why not accept that promise today? Why not step out of the crisis in your life and the chaos in your life and allow Jesus to make a difference? He offers you this peace through His Word and directing you to accept and to follow Him, to give your life to Him completely, to confess that He is Lord, to repent of your sins and be baptized into Him. At the end of this message, there's a number. And if you have a decision to make, I invite you to give me a call. I look forward to hearing from you. Till next week, God bless you. Take care. I love you.